It's the time for the Dan Tack Annual Muskie Catch and Release Award. This annual tournament was established in 2019, and the first award was presented at the 2020 Winter Environmental Conference. The purpose of the tournament is to further promote catch and release fishing with special emphasis on muskies. The tournament is named in honor of Dan Tack, a longtime seasonal visitor and eventually a resident of the Thousand Islands, and also a great friend to many of us in the room. Dan was an avid fisherman. In fact, he first visited this region as a teenager and fished for his dinner under the Thousand Islands Bridge. But we remember Dan for much more than fishing. He was an enthusiastic supporter and loved everything about the Thousand Islands. He and his wife, Martha, supported countless area nonprofits. Among them were Save the River, the Antique Boat Museum, Clayton Opera House, Tears, Tilt, and especially Zenda Farms. And a visit to Save the River's office from Dan Tack was always an enjoyable experience for all of us. He had a warm and special way of delivering a message to us about his concerns about the river environment. And after Dan left, you knew what his concerns were. So presenting this year's award is a person himself active in many community organizations, Jeff Garnsey. We heard a little bit more about Jeff, but Jeff's going to present the award today.
So for those of you that are keeping track at home, this year fall didn't show up until way later than it normally does on the river. And the result of that, there are always those unintended consequences. This year, the take of muskies more than doubled from any previous year in about the last decade that I know. Now, there are a couple of reasons that could be. One is that the river remained, with the exception there was a little less of it, it remained much more accessible to many more sportsmen over a longer period of time because of the mild weather that we experienced this fall. And as a result, the pattern that when I was a youngster was kind of a little bit clearer, where the younger fish are caught in that September time frame after the first northeast wind blows the weed beds off, and then the big boys come from the lake where they've been happily eating LY all summer long, migrate down toward 40 acres, and for the real sportsmen that don't mind a little frost on the pumpkin that show up in the latter part of November and December, that's when these monsters show up. Well, this year we had an almost unprecedented amount of real river monsters caught and successfully released. A lot of education is out there as to the appropriate way to land, to handle, and then release these beautiful fish. And Dan had a great deal to do with that, and he was here during the time when there's no way we could possibly run out of muskie. You know, back when we would bring a fish in, have a white flag on the lanyard of the boat, hang it at Bertrand's, T.I. Sun would show up, take a picture, we'd eat the fish and think that it was never going to end. Well, as a result of some real formal education and informal bannering in local places like the Coffee Cove, in the early 80s, they started releasing these fish. And Dan was a true advocate of the fact that something this amazing is way, way too valuable to catch just once. And this year, as if these folks that spend all this time on the water have taken turns, all the local guides seem to be taking their turn at catching them. Bob Walters, who has an amazing boat called the Water Wolf, which is a nickname for the muskie, he had a gentleman named Derek Balmos catch a 56.5-inch muskie, which is an absolute monster. That fish had a 28-inch girth, a large breeding female, and something about Bob Walters, he's done monitoring for IGFA, the International Game Federation, for years. And this is a guy that very much puts the fish safety paramount. He has a boat that is custom rigged to ensure the safe catch and release of the fish. He has these cool little hammocks where they're sit horizontal, they're never put under stress. That's about the largest angle you ever see a fish, and that's just prior to the release from the platform. But just this year in November and December, we had 8 very similar fish caught. Now last year, remember, everybody was making noise because we'd caught 3 55-inchers. This was almost unprecedented, and this is due in no small part from the work of advocacy groups like this, and of course the work of John Farrell over on Governor's Island monitoring these fish. But this tournament has really shined a light on the importance, and you know, we're a place that shines lights and brings help, and this tournament does a lot in going toward that. So instead of having a mounted skin mount on his wall, he will have this cool little plaque, which is also suitable for framing, and he will have his brass plaque name added to the beautiful walnut plaque that's in the front office of Save the River, thanks to the help of Save the River and Dan Tack. So thanks very much for allowing me to send this off with my congratulations along with yours.